You can't fear failure. Failure is going to happen, but you can't fear it, and there's nothing to be afraid of it. So let's talk about some of the problems you're going to run into and why you don't have to worry. It is inevitable in business that you're going to come across what we'll call failure. Failure, we could just say, is problems that happen. All right, so you're going to have a sales slump. You're going to have a customer who's a really difficult customer. You're going to have problems on job sites. You're going to have jobs you lose money on. You might have an insurance claim. Who knows what they're going to be? There's way more than I could ever list. All right, so there's a lot of problems, and they're going to happen. And even with all the training and all the experience in the world, they're still going to happen. And I can just tell you that because I've been doing this forever, and we still have problems. They never end. But failure is really how we progress. So let's look at a couple different ways that we can change our relationship to failure so that we aren't afraid of it, and so it can be incredibly productive and actually make us stronger. The first thing is I want to talk to you about why you don't need to worry about failure and be afraid of it. This is one of the huge benefits of the painting business and the industry we're in, is the biggest problems aren't that big of problems. All right, so if you're being smart about your business, you're not biting off more than you can chew. For example, you're not going out and doing a $150,000 project when the biggest project you've ever done is $15,000. That would be trying to bite off more than you can chew. If you're not doing that and you're kind of staying within your realm of what you're comfortable doing and then just taking small steps out slowly, then you're not really exposing yourself to any huge risks. So the first thing I would say is don't put yourself in any positions where if it became a problem, you would be totally screwed. So if you take that advice, then the biggest problem you're gonna have is a $2,000 or $3,000 problem. $2,000 or $3,000 is how much money you can make on a single project. So what I'd recommend is just plan your business out knowing I'm gonna run into problems. Those problems are gonna cost me money, and that's part of the cost of doing business. If you just mentally prepare that that's just part of it, then when it happens, it's okay. You're not trying to fight tooth and nail for every dollar. You're just like, oh, this was gonna happen. This is what it costs. I'm gonna do what it takes to make it right, learn from it, and move on. The second thing I wanna talk about is the importance of shifting your mindset with what's the most important part of a problem. So what most people do when there's a problem or a failure in business is they attack it to fix the problem. You have to do that part. That's why everybody does it. But that's not the valuable part. You know, if you're gonna lose $3,000 or you have a $3,000 problem, you might be able to fix it and make it only a $2,000 problem. So that makes you $1,000. But if you don't take the time to slow down and say, hey, why did that problem happen? What did we screw up? What did we do a day before, a week before, a month before that we could do differently to prevent that problem from happening? If we went back in time, how could I have prevented that problem from happening? That's the most valuable lesson, because if we don't do that thinking and put new systems and structure in place, if we don't learn from it, we're gonna keep making that same mistake over and over, and it's gonna cost us $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 over the years. But if we learn from it, it's not a $2,500 loss. It's a $50,000 savings because the lesson I got. So if I start to look at these problems and their cost, not as a cost, but as that's gonna save me X over time, if I learn from it, the most important thing becomes simply learning from these failures, mistakes, and problems. The next thing I wanna mention is that this is why it's really valuable to have a mentor or a coach or someone who's kind of been there before and is further along than you. Because I've seen, as a coach over the years, a lot of people make the wrong conclusions about problems. For example, they have a problem with this client and they say, well, I'm not gonna work with people like this anymore. It's like, yes, that will prevent that problem maybe, but more likely it was a problem in your process, in your expectations, and how you handled things, and how you served someone. And it's gonna be way more valuable to fix it that way rather than just cutting off opportunities in business and getting smaller and smaller. The key is we wanna be putting things in place that make us bigger, more powerful, more effective, no matter what circumstances are thrown at us, and not to be making decisions that just cut out problems. You know, because the end result of that kind of thinking is, well, I shouldn't have hired that guy, I should just do the painting myself. And you start cutting out opportunities all the way down to like, well, what I've learned is that if you want a job done right, you just gotta do it yourself, and I'm just gonna paint jobs the rest of my life. And that's not that's not a wise way to learn from failure. That's just getting smaller from failure. What we want to do is take failures and learn how to be bigger, how to be more effective, dealing with any circumstances that are thrown at us, so we actually elevate what we're capable of and what we can accomplish. If certain employees aren't working out, I say, why aren't they working out? How do I solve that problem, not eliminate that problem? How do I solve the problem, not eliminate the problem? The last thing you can do is, if you're ever really worried about failure, and especially like maybe before you're starting a business or something like that, or maybe before doing a project, one thing you want to think through is just do the failure exercise and actually write out, what's the worst case scenario? What's the actual worst case scenario that if that happened, what is it, and how could I get back to where I am today if the worst possible thing happened? This is an exercise from Tim Ferriss, actually. He's got a YouTube video on it. It's called like a fear setting exercise. You search it as a TED Talk, or it's in his book. He talks about how you map out the worst case scenario failure and then put a percentage on it. What's the likelihood that that actually happens? Okay, great. So that could happen. Really unlikely, the worst case one. And then there's like maybe a milder one. We're like, that one could happen. That's not so bad. What's the likelihood of that? It's still probably pretty small. And then there's this likelihood of success. What's the likelihood of that? And if the bad ones happened, what would I do? Let's just pretend we move forward, the worst thing happens. What would I do to get back to where I am today? And what I've always found doing this, and what I've seen a lot of people find doing this, is I could get back to where I am today pretty darn quick. I really don't have much to fear there. Now, if you do this exercise and you're like, well, the worst case scenario is I could lose everything, then you might not want to do that one. All right, that's where you got to limit your risk. Don't be stupid. Take risks you can take. But also, what's way more common is people not taking action because they're afraid of something that they really don't need to be afraid of. So I would really recommend looking at your fears, looking at what you're afraid of, changing your relationship to failure, because the truth is, how you build a great business is you fail. Those failures tell you where you're weak. That's where you need to go to work on improving yourself, your business, your systems. And if that's your relationship to failure, it makes you stronger and stronger with every single failure. And that's the way you want to build your business.